that there is no such thing as a new joke. All jokes are based on, I think, 4 is the presumed basis. There are no new songs. They are all variations on old songs that were written 300, 500, 1,000 years ago. Now, technocracy, from what I've been able to understand, is a plan that is a completely new dimension of thought. You're going to have to convince me that there can be a completely new dimension of thought. And as soon as you do that, then I'm probably on your wavelength.
Well, that's great, Bob. We appreciate the opportunity of trying to convince you. Technocracy is certainly something new. It has no precedent. It has its origin in the evolution of a technical and a technological society. And in order to put this in its perspective, I think it's rather important to indicate where we've been and perhaps where we're going to better have an understanding of this thing, technocracy. As the listeners out there realize that in my youth, we lived on a farm. We lived in what we called a relatively agrarian society, and I'm not that old. This is a relatively short period of time we're discussing. Most work, or a great portion of our work, was done by hand. We would characterize that sort of an environment as a hand-tool agrarian society. This would be so really from recorded history up to the point of speaking of. There was, we used a few draft animals and that type of thing to help us with the work, but basically we'll call that a low-energy society. And by that I mean we were converting energy per person at a very low rate. Then in that sort of social structure was introduced the concept of machines, technology. In its early inception, of course, the machines were introduced very slowly. Then they speeded up rather rapidly. Until now, we have a situation where all of us are well acquainted with automatic processes, where instead of having a hand-tool society, we now have what we call an automated society, or a technological society. And this is characterized by words like cybernation and all these new terms that most of us aren't even, we're not even familiar with. I know my generation, hell, every time I pick up the paper and I see all these new technical words, communication is lost. But the point I'm trying to make, Bob, is that what we have witnessed, and this is why technocracy, we pretty got to say why technocracy. We've come from the past into the future, and it has happened so quickly that the institutions then of the past are incapable of coping with the environment that the future has presented to us. I don't know if that gives you an indication, or does that said a lot and explain nothing? Huh?
Gee, I hate to say it. It said a lot. It's explained little.
Right.
And I don't know how I can approach that. I'm going to have to suggest that this is not an evolution, but a revolution. And see how that strikes you.
Well, to be a case of definition of terms, it certainly is a revolution. We've turned our society completely upside down and inside out. Maybe I could explain it this way. The values that were generated because of this low-energy society we're talking about, or the hand-tool society, were the values of work hard, the Protestant work ethic, work hard, you'll succeed, and all this sort of thing. But we get into 1975 and we find out that's not the picture at all. We have most people unemployed. Their ability to sell their time in competition to machine is pretty nearly impossible. So the ethics, the morals, the mores of the past no longer are applicable to the 1975 situation. Does that give you some sort of error? Does that clarify it a little bit?
It clarifies it somewhat. It clarifies it because you admit, and I'm not saying that you have any reason not to admit, but you admit the term revolution, and not in the usual connotation. But it is a turning about of social structure that has happened. And I believe that technocracy represents another turning about, but it isn't full circle.
Right.
Now, it's full circle in one respect, but it's utilizing what has happened in the other respect. So what you're doing is you're going from A to B, back to A, but keeping B.
Well, now you've sort of lost me, Bob. Maybe Fred here can throw some clarification.
I'd like to interject this thought that the
move back a little bit.
The definition of social change is the increased use of energy outside of man's muscles, or the decreased use of energy outside of man's muscles. Where would we dig, and where would we find any other civilization that was plugged in to 24 billion horsepower? So far, we have zero results. So we must go on with what we have, which is a tremendous change in the rate of conversion of energy.
Okay, well, that's exactly what I said, really, and you missed it.
All right, right. Well, listen, I'm here to learn too. You see, this isn't an absolute thing necessarily.
Exactly, but I want to make sure that I have it clear, and that's why I said it the way I did. We started off with, let's say, the agrarian concept, and we went to an industrialized, highly industrialized, and technologically concept. Now we're moving back to some of the precepts and concepts of the agrarian society, which was the use of energy for distinct purpose. Okay?
Yeah.
Distinct and economical purpose, and using what we've come to accomplish this.
Well, all right. I'm not sure that I agree with this.
Oh, that's fine.
I don't think we're moving back.
Well, see, the moving back, I'm afraid I shouldn't perhaps have done, except that there was nothing wrong with back there.
Well, let's put it this way.
From a human point of view.
All right.
Okay.
Technocracy doesn't approach it. You say there was nothing wrong. Unfortunately, we don't approach it from the moral standpoint, whether this is right or wrong.
Oh, okay.
Get the point?
No.
It was just a fact of life that because of this agrarian economy, or the hand tool economy, or the low energy conversion economy, certain values were developed. And we don't attempt to moralize these. Now, what has occurred, of course, because of this progression of the industrial state, to use your term, we've got into an industrial society then, the thing we haven't adapted ourselves to a new set of values. We're still going out in the economic sense, we'll say now, and we're asking for jobs, for example. Well, jobs are passé. There's no more jobs in the sense that we were talking of them in the past. I would have to make a personal reference. I got out of the shop at 55 because there's no work there. We want to allow the young people to come up and put an input. And this is a new concept of values. The fellows going out of the shop, for example, they're not even prepared to go to the society of leisure. They're going from a moral concept, or let's put it this way, the concept of work, the Protestant work ethic, and suddenly it's not there. And this is creating some of the social problems that the technocrats address themselves to. The problems of leisure time, for example. This is an aspect of technocracy. And this is the byproduct. And we've got to face this, that the technocrats propose that we're going into a society of leisure, which is a tremendous challenge to the population in this continent. You know, we'd slough it off and say, well, sure, I can adjust to leisure. It isn't quite that easy. Talk to anybody that's left the plants or industry or an executive position, and they've completely changed their lifestyle, and there's a tremendous problem of adjustment.
Okay. Let me stop you there. That aspect is probably one of the few humanistic attitudes that I have so far been able to discover in technocracy. I would like to pursue this impression of mine after this break.
Right.
You get that all the time.
Well, always.
Supposing I were to say, starkly, yes, we're on. Yeah. Okay. We're going.
Beautiful.
Okay. Supposing I were to say starkly that technocracy, as I see it, so far, is the how violently would you react?
Well, I would appreciate your comment, number one, because it's an observation that's made many times. And I think I can maybe indicate why it's made. Because of the nature of our social problem today, the energy shortage, the resource depletion, the environmental problems, and this type of thing, we take an engineering approach to the solution of these things, and unfortunately we emphasize the solution to physical problems. But as you get into the design of technocracy, the participation in solving these problems on the part of the total population only involves 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, retirement at 45. I'm now telling you the ultimate design of technocracy. And this is engaged in this physical environment, which tends to be cold, the antithesis to the humanities, as you say. But once you get this base, and a corollary of this, then you go into this culture of leisure. Now, when you do this, then, the arts will flourish. Your freedom is maximum, provided you don't interfere with anybody else. We don't care if you jog down the river, you get out and paint, and the humanities, for the first time, I shouldn't say for the first time, but for a great, the order of magnitude would be tremendous, will be allowed to flourish because the base is there. There's no sense, if you don't have your food, clothing, shelter, and all the physical things, which are given to you by the technicians, the technology, the resources, the hard sort of sciences, the others can't flourish. Now, I don't know whether I make the point, but you can see why, and this is a criticism that the technocracy people always get. You're so damn materialistic, and you're hard, you're cold, and all the rest of the terms. And while in actuality we're really not, because we're going to create, we're not going to create, conditions are now going to be for the first time where we can have and develop the humanity. We can get to know our brother. Today, we know him because we want to rip him off. I mean, unfortunately, that's the type of society we live in. When I meet you, Bob, say, well, what the hell can I get out of Bob, sort of a deal. What business is he in? Maybe I can get a promotion, or maybe I can sell him some real estate. Okay, when you eliminate those requirements or those attitudes, or if you create a new environment, I don't know whether I'm making my point.
You're doing fine.
Then the humanities will flourish, the arts, the music, the literature. We don't know what the culture of abundance will be. This is it's a speculation or a projection. But there's one thing for sure, it'll never be the same as you've got it today.
Well, what you're doing, and you said it pretty well too, what you're doing, if I may synthesize it, is to create a better environment for the expanding of the humanities.
Beautiful.
Okay? Did I do it right?
You put it in 5 words. We're going to get you into technocracy, Bob. I don't know. There's a thought. Anyway, we might be able to work something like that.
No, that's what I do. You know,
right. No, and I appreciate that. That was well. But I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have to be able to do that, and also it makes it clearer for me. I think this way.
Right. No, I agree with this.
Okay. All right. That being the case, then your methodology,
Methodology.
Where did I get that Freudian slip? Anyhow, your methodology does seem cold. I must admit, from looking at a couple of leaflets that you gave me, and I promise you that's all I did because I didn't want to study it and then come in being an authority like you are. Okay. But your methodology does seem a trifle stark and a trifle cold. However, your purposes are such that anyone who looks beyond that has to realize that what you really want to do is for the good of humanity. Okay?
Yeah, let me enlarge on that.
Am I doing it right there?
Very good. Now, I would like to tie it in with the parallel that we're experiencing here today. The regimentation of the equipment and the necessity for designing these controls. We utilize them, but we are very happy with them because it produces a terrific end product of benefit to humanity. You indicated, Burgess, you moved to the mic, you get close. This is regimentation that we accept as North Americans, and this technology, if it's properly oriented, will not induce more regimentation. We will accept more regimentation with the fact that there will be tremendous benefits to humanity as a result of this minimum of regimentation by science, not by persons.
Okay. All right. Good. We're going to have to get you to get over there a little further because you're getting muffled, and I want to, but we got you. I think we got what you said. All right. Now, I don't know where to go from here because you answered about 8 questions. But that's fine. That's what we want to do because we don't have enough time to cover it entirely. I don't want to move to the ultimate yet. We'll get to that, I guess, towards the end. I will ask you one small question that troubled me, interested me, that I noticed. Maybe you can explain dynamic balance.
Well, I could give you an illustration in this sense. You hear a lot of ecosystems, you hear about ecology and this sort of thing. They're all related. And here is the real grassroots basic explanation. Dynamic balance means that where all energy, number one, comes from the sun. I'm going to try to give you a closed system. If we enclosed a bunch of grass with a fence, and we got the energy from the sun, the dynamic balance would be, in that simple illustration, would be the grass blades using that energy and reaching a level that they can't get anymore, and all those blades of grass would be in balance fighting for the energy from the sun. Now, I'm going to go one step further, maybe it will clarify it or maybe confuse it, I don't know. We'll interject into that then, or put into that situation, a pair of rabbits. Now, these rabbits are going to eat that grass until they become in balance with the amount of grass there to maintain a rabbit population. That gives you a dynamic balance between the sun, the energy from the sun, the grass, and the rabbits. We'll go one step further to complicate it further. Let's throw some coyotes in there, some carnivorous animals. So we have the sun coming down, the grass absorbs it, we have a lush field of grass, we throw the rabbits in there, they become in balance with the grass optimum, can't get beyond a certain level. Then we throw the coyotes in there, they eat the rabbits, so we have 3 people. Okay, let's go one step further. We'll throw the human components in there, then that's the maximum population that could be maintained in that given area because the energy base, the sun to the grass, to the rabbits, always in balance, the coyotes, I don't know what the humans would eat in that illustration, but that's the dynamic balance of plant and animal. That's the web of life.
All energy-consuming devices.
So that's what you've got. Does that clarify or muddy it?
No, that I'm not going to call it simplistic, but that does say it, except there are little things we could throw in from the side. For instance, the fact that the sun was also shining on the rabbits and the coyotes and the people. And that destroys the straight line of thought I had when you said the sun's on the grass and the grass goes to the sun. Well, now the sun also goes to the people and to the...
Yeah, but the chain, you've got to find some method of using. This is the fight for that sun, or the fight for the energy, is the dynamic balance of all the various... Fred used the energy-consuming devices, and this is and life is this way.
Well, see,
in total,
the way I got your parallel though was that the sun was going to the grass, and it was the only thing benefiting from it, from the sun,
yeah,
the energy, and of course all of the matters were involved, and so that makes a different kind of equation.
Right. Well,
which I hope we understand.
All we're struggling for energy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We could define ecology here, and ecology is that science which takes into account all these energy conversions that are taking place in our environment. And we've got to get ecologically in balance, or get a dynamic balance, and this is what's occurring. You see, if I might enlarge now, get into the social field, the whole economic field. We are using on this continent in the area of 16, 17 million barrels of oil per day. It took many years for that process to get whipped around and turned inside out to get deposited in the earth. Now we're using that at that tremendous rate, and our lifestyle depends on its continued use. And this is the reason technocracy. We can't continue to use, and we've got to understand the dynamic balance to understand our social problems. And this gets into a little more depth, but technocracy is a dynamic interpretation of social phenomena that we don't want, but all it is taking into account these various factors. And Fred maybe could enlarge on that, or I don't want to make it.
It's
Did
fine.
you make the point?
Yes, you did, but I want Fred to enlarge on that in a moment. But I'll tell you what, I think perhaps so far we have put the cart before the horse, and in enlarging on the subject after we take a short break, maybe Fred to Burgess on Technocracy. All right, the dynamic balance we've tried to explain in simple terms, but now, as I said, we did have the cart before the horse. I do think we should talk in, I suppose, general terms into what the precise, how can we do that? Talk in general terms about what the precise objectives of technocracy are. No, not the technocracy state, which is the what do you call that?
Technate.
The Technate. We'll get to that later. Let's talk about the where we're going first, and then we'll say what we'll have when we get there.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the reasons, let's say, for technocracy's existence at this point in time, that we find that we're on a sort of a collision course, and we're not really in the sense that we're do good, and although the end product would be a do good end product, but we point out that the collision course we're on, the rapid increase in the use of resources, the rapid increase in the social disintegration, could create conditions that will challenge the very survival of man. Now that sounds rather extreme.
It does.
But as you get into the actual conditions that the course we're on, you'll find that it's really not that extreme. At least the technocracy analysis would indicate it's not that extreme. It's a statement of fact, in other words, and can be verified by anybody that wants to make the necessary, do the necessary research. So, with that projection that we're on this collision course, the technocracy exists to sort of inform the power structure, the people that run our society, that they must change their direction if we are to survive. And then the technocrats have assumed the responsibility of informing the public of these facts that they have dug out, what must be done in order to sort of salvage our society. To define the two, one depends on scarcity in its environment for its operation, and it's fairly successful. Technocracy operates from the basis of abundance, which destroys the whole concept of price. And we could bring it close to home. Our old friend Whalen out there in Anderton, he's got the job of having so many eggs they come out of his ears, and he's got to pay the farmers or institutionalize techniques whereby we limit the production of eggs. And of course we've had a lot of scandal. We get a lot of fun out of it. No criticism of Gene, but he is faced with the problems that technocrats are talking about. North America is producing in abundance, whether it's eggs or you name it, and the system can't cope. And in an attempt to maintain the system, and we do a lot of foolish things. We paid the farmers a couple of years ago to quit growing grain. This year they're in a panic. We're all starving. I'm always thinking old Senator Eastland down in Mississippi. He's a congressman or senator down there, votes against aid for dependent children, and he got $160,000 for cotton he didn't grow, a subsidy program. These types of nonsensical things. So getting back to socialism and communism, these things, they are a natural outgrowth of unstable social conditions and an attempt by sincere people to institute programs of more equitably distributing what you have.
I like to project it, too, along that same line, that they were men that thought they had an answer. What we indicate that they were dreamers. Wouldn't it be nice if? Well, that's great. Wouldn't it be nice if we had utopia? But we never had the engine for converting the energy for twisting raw materials into the goodies of life fast enough. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we would subdivide this scarcity and be nice people? There's no such thing as subdividing the scarcity and being nice people. But along came the technocrats, developed the technology, and created an abundance, and you can only do one thing with abundance, is consume it.
You know what keeps going through my mind? I'm not going to ask it. I don't even want you to comment on it. except that I think we can deny it now, in case anyone else has been thinking of George Orwell.
Right. Well, of course,
We can deny it.
right. I definitely. They always take a crack at the side as to that area
Do they?
or whatever. Oh yeah, very much so.
Okay, I thought it would occur to other people too.
Oh, will.
But 1984 is closer than we think, for one thing, and I don't see any signs. Okay, we'll leave it. But we do have to take a break here, and I want to get back to the final state, which you do not call utopia, which ruined one of the questions I was going to ask you. You don't call it utopia. Fine. Let's see what you do call it after this break. It's foolish to call it utopia. Although it may be. I don't think it's so foolish to call it utopia. It's just that people use that term. Plato didn't mean what people mean now when they say utopia. I'll just throw that in, just
Right,
for the fun of it,
right.
okay? But let's be practical and not use like a word that can connotate into something that doesn't mean. Tell me about the state. Once achieved, and that will explain a lot.
Right. Well, the most important thing in a technate, and this is a term that the technocrats have used for their operation of the North American continent. It is a North American idea, and maybe we should just mention this a little, because North America is the only continent in the world as of today that has the resources and the technical development to have a technate state. Just a fact of life. Now, in this technate state, of course, properly managed, we would be able to produce number one, and distribute to the total population all the goods and services that they would physically require to use. That's all the clothing, food, there would be no want. This, of course, doesn't guarantee that in your interpersonal relationships you're going to be happy. This is the important thing. Utopia, I think, sort of, there's an implication there that you never have any problems and all this, you see. But in the technate state, you're going to utilize your resources to its optimum use and plan for the future, and so then you would guarantee this abundance to everyone. Now, this naturally is going to develop a new culture of which the technocrats no way could project it. This situation has no precedent. And so there's the big question mark. You know, all the questions are going to come up now, I assume, from our listeners, and they're legitimate ones. What's this going to do? Are we going to get fat and lazy? Are we going to kill all initiative? And what's the motivation going to be? And so you have all these propositions to contend with. But being, and I like to use the word sometimes, the technocrats are being referred to as social engineers. The people that deal in behavior and the relevant things with how we do things, why we do things, project that once you take care of all the physical wants, that we will adjust quite nicely and fit in and develop a beautiful culture. For example, I'm going to touch one thing. In the technocracy design, the technate, when you give everybody an abundance, you immediately eliminate 95% of crime, because crimes are crimes of acquisition against your fellow man, 95%. Now, we're not changing anybody's behavior. We didn't make everybody good. We didn't start with a proposition they were bad. We changed the physical environment where crime become nonsense. As another thing, people say, well, you're going to run into this situation, people are going to hoard a bunch of stuff, because we've been conditioned to scarcity. And I like Fred's example of air. There's three of us here in the studio. One of us isn't trying to breathe more air than the other person, and yet it's very, very fundamental to living. So our behavior patterns will change in direct relationship to that environmental change. An environment of abundance, then we're going to have a different culture.
If we got it, we ain't going to steal it.
That's the point. And that's
What's the percentage?
Right. Did that sort of hit what you were looking for, Bob? Interrupt me. I have a tendency. I know you will.
Oh,
but
don't worry, I will. But as long as you're going on a line and explaining things, I'll let you go.
Right.
Let me throw something else in at you, though, because we're talking about the technate as a fact.
Right.
Democracy. Word association. Democracy.
I'd like to mention that. For the first time in the history of the world, you're going to have a democracy that had some meaning. For example, today you have the rather dubious opportunity or privilege of voting once every 4 years. You put an X on the ballot opposite a name. You know none of his qualifications usually. You know none of the requirements of the job. And this might insult a lot of people, but you are putting a mark of illiteracy. You don't know what you are really doing. This is rather a real harsh statement. But in a Technate, the distribution mechanism serves a very important purpose. It's what we call an energy certificate. And I could associate it with a credit card. When I go to a consumer, as a consumer, to a distribution point and buy, say, a suit, that is my vote to have the technical aspect of a Technate to reproduce a suit. And this technique is the contribution of our director-in-chief and engineer to this new system. It is a feedback control where the total population are telling the technical people what they want. That's what we define as a physical democracy. I am stating as many times a day as I go to the store what I want. That is a meaningful vote.
Yeah, you're voting every time you do something.
Right. That is democracy as it really, and it can't be in a scarcity society because it's a fight who's going to get what. But in this new concept, the environment that we can create, then we have the base for the first time to have a physical democracy. And it's interesting. If people don't want to consume, then we don't have to produce. We sort of regulate our own activity. And this is very interesting also. We have a society today of conspicuous consumption because it's scarce. If I can go out and get a big caddy and these type of things, the big cars, I've arrived. But in a society where everybody can have this abundance, that behavior pattern is going to change. People would look at me as some sort of a nut if I wanted to drive a big car to show off. Or try to eat 3 steaks, or there's many examples. So in a technocracy, or in a Technate, we would have the physical democracy, which has never been able to, we never had the environment for it. Does that answer, it somewhat?
So as I said, it was a word association thing. I wanted to see how you would respond to my using the word.
We might amplify the fact that the design and the specifications of this new operation does not incorporate any type of value, money, rubles, changing from dollars or any other medium of distribution. That it's strictly a transfer of energy from the raw materials to the finished product. What total amount of energy did it cost the North American continent in getting that physical product at the commodity terminal? When that physical product is requisitioned by the North American, he requisitions that material. There's no purchase. He doesn't buy it. He requisitions that. The minute that pair of shoes, which we will assume required the transfer of 1 kilowatt of electrical energy from raw material to finished product, this is a cost to 360 million North Americans, not that individual. And we're not going to totalize the energy of the human conversion due to the fact that we're in this new technological civilization. 98% of the energy that goes into everything that we eat, ride, and wear is metrical, and it's very rigid in the form of kilogram calories, kilowatts, foot-pounds, or what have you, work done. When that's requisitioned, it's canceled off. Every purchase of every minute of every hour on a continental computer, we will recognize the degradation of energy or the use of that energy that has been expended, fill the inventories proportionately, and there again comes a dynamic balance between production and consumption of the entire continent of North America.
Oh boy. I don't know where you leave me now, fellas, because... Okay, let me throw one more at you. We have about a minute and a half, haven't we? Yes. And I'm sure you can answer this in a minute and a half. We're talking about... We mentioned democracy, etc., and then lack of need for a ballot to elect people. All right, how do these people qualify? What are their credentials to be leaders? Because you have to have leaders all the way along the line. Okay? Right. This is an important aspect of this, which I have neglected to ask you.
It's a very important point. This is, in Technocracy, we talk about a functional society, and it's because it's technical. Mm-hmm. I could illustrate it in your line of work here. If they were going to select somebody to take your place, They would never go to a ballot. Your supervisor, whoever he might be, there might be three, he will select who can fill the job, and he's the only one. So we're going into a technical society where it's what we call functional control. You get your job on the basis of function. Now, if somebody tried to pervert that and say, well, I'm going to put my buddy in there, he'd come into this studio and make a complete shambles. It wouldn't work. I often illustrate, if I got a little more time, in the shop. They say, well, I'm going to put my buddy on and make him a maintenance man in the electrical department. That's the worst thing you could do. Send him out in the first breakdown, you look like a nut. So the environmental conditions, the technical conditions, determine who gets that job. And if he isn't functional and can't do it, there's no use putting anybody on it. I'll give you another illustration. If your car isn't working out there, don't send your friend to fix it. Whether you like the guy, whether he has a different philosophy, whatever, send some guy who understands the car. I don't know what that describes it, but in essence, that's how you get your position today.
You get your position by knowing what you're doing.
Right, and it would continue. You'd only, in a technocracy, you would eliminate the financial superstructure, the patronage, the hanky-pank would not be required. Fair enough?
Fair enough. I think we've covered, about a 16th of what we'd like to have covered. However, we've done something. I have to accuse both of you of being brilliant schizophrenics.
Beautiful, whatever that means.
Well, I'll tell you why, because both of you have to think in this.
Right, well, that's very important.
And yet, all of your thought processes go along these lines, and yet you have to think in the society as it stands.
We are trapped into
survive.
Right, we're trapped into a system. This is important, and technocrats realize this. So it looks like we double talk, and schizophrenic is an excellent term in that context. We live in a money system. We behave like everybody else out there, but we realize it's breaking down. We are planning, projecting, and anticipating. And as a matter of fact, the technocrats are preparing for a new society, and we can only go up.
We're not going to
We're not agitating for the change. We're preparing for one.
That's good. That's good. Not agitating. Okay. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure any questions, and there will be some, can be directed, and I'll tell them where to send their questions as soon as we play a little music, or whatever we do after this most exhausting but interesting conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
My guests were Leo Proby and Fred Burgess, and that address, incidentally, is Technocracy Incorporated, 782 Victoria Street, Windsor. The phone number 258-2570.